Hey guys, this is for Monday, October 19th. And we're going to be taking a look at chapters 8 and 9 in McLaren today and see how they apply to us in terms of reality. McLaren's a little controversial at times, and that's fine. But I love his statement from page 91. We can very easily confuse the Bible says with I say the Bible says, which we then equate with God says. In other words, God says what I say. That's a very dangerous proposition. So we have to deal with the idea of how do we do that? Because we do it so easily, we don't think about it. It's pretty easy. It's our culture. It's what we're raised in. We don't see it. We don't think about it. We don't notice it. It's kind of like the water that a fish swims in. They don't pay any attention to it. It's just there. And they don't think about it. Nothing. The only time they notice it is when they're out of it. Culture's a lot like water. We're born into it. It seeps into us from the earliest days, from our parents, our siblings. We grow up in it. At some point it becomes part of us, and we no longer pay any attention to it at all. As I've said before, it's like the operating system on a computer. I've got Windows 10 on this computer. I don't pay any attention to it at all until something goes wrong. And then I'm like, what? What do I have to fix? It's kind of those things like, those things that everybody knows without saying. What do I mean? Let's go out for a drink. The normal interpretation of that is going to be, let's go get an alcoholic drink. Doesn't say that, does it? And it may not mean that, but normally that is what it means. He was drinking last night. Oh, well. Doesn't say he was drinking water. The assumption is there. So we hear a phrase, we assume we know what the rest of it is that nobody ever has to say. And that's part of our culture as well. It's that everyone knows it. I don't have to say it. Then there's the unwritten expectations. Everyone is supposed to know. Like what? Don't cheat. Don't lie. Don't steal. Be nice. Be polite. I could go on and on and on and on. Those are expectations. Now imagine what kind of reaction you would get if you came to school wearing a tuxedo or a dress. Our expectations are that you won't do that, particularly the dress. So culture also defines all of those silent things in the back of our head that define what we should and should not do. Now, if you were raised in a church like I was, you were raised with a set of expectations regarding behavior and beliefs. As a matter of fact, I don't care what church you were raised in, you were subjected to expectations regarding behavior and belief. You were also told how to read the Bible and what it means. You were told this is what it says. We were told that it speaks for itself. That was a little later, which is mostly true, but not entirely. But we were not told how all these expectations and unwritten rules interpret scriptures for us rather than us interpreting scripture. It's an automatic thing that the brain does instantaneously. We don't even realize it. Every time we begin reading, we begin interpreting based on all of these factors and many, many more. This is why The language may be completely clear. A very short, simple sentence. And people will interpret it differently. It's because of their own expectations and biases and beliefs. My upbringing told me to search Scripture for God's rules and laws. Why? God was a rule maker, a lawmaker. And if we didn't follow God's rules and laws, we were in for serious trouble. And I do mean serious. That was easy to do, and it fit McLaren's description of the constitutional model. Imagine my surprise when I began to read Scripture and I began to see it as a drama of real-life people, flesh and blood people, going through hard times, going through challenges. It started to become real. It was kind of like I saw the drama for the first time. That this is not a series of short, distinct little stories, all of them isolated. It is a series of interconnected dramas. And the drama always is underway. I began to see Scripture as an unveiling. In other words, the veil is lifted. You begin to see clearly. By the way, the word revelation comes from the word apocalypse, and apocalypse means unveiling, revealing. It does not mean the end of the world. Never has. So it's an unveiling of the very real relationship that God has between himself and his people, his ever-wandering and rebellious children. Scripture came alive to me at that point, more than it ever had been before. And it's never been the same. That's McLaren's point. Scripture is not a collection of dead writings from thousands of years ago, but a compilation of real-life stories of victory and tragedy, joy and grieving, terrible loss and miraculous healing. Carried forward, it's the story of us today. Why is that important? Really, how does it relate to your generation? Why might it matter to a generation that has largely written off the church as irrelevant to their lives? Your peers are seeking something they cannot find. They're searching. They're looking, but they can't find it. They're searching for something real and solid that they can rely upon. Now, they describe themselves as spiritual, but not religious. They sense a longing for something they can't identify. You see, I think they've heard rumors of another world coming alongside ours. It's a place where the holes in their souls can be healed. They want what you have, but don't know, one, they don't know what it is. Two, they don't know where to find it. Now, they're rejecting the false religiosity that they see around them coming from my generation on down. And my generation inherited it from my parents' generation and so on. They want it to be real at a soul-changing level. I can't blame them, not a bit. Do you suppose that helping them understand the Bible, not as a series of precepts and rules, there's space enough for that, but as the stories of flesh and blood people coping as best they could, really might appeal to them? Really, what feeds relationships from first glance to intimacy? It's our stories. We tell each other our stories. And in our stories, we bare our souls. In our stories, we become vulnerable. In our stories, we say, this is me. warts and all. Now, our stories, we can lie in our stories too, but people figure that out pretty quick. The more we share our stories, the lower we drop our defenses and eliminate the barriers between us. Why? Our stories share our humanity, and we eventually see that we are all more alike than different. I don't care where you're from, whether you're Christian or Muslim, doesn't matter. And I'm totally serious about this. Now, some of you just had an automatic gut reaction to the word Muslim. That's your bias. That's it. It just jumped out and bit you. I want to give you an example. In the paper it says it's Crete, but it isn't. It's Cyprus. I misidentified it. But Cyprus is a large island in the eastern Mediterranean Sea. It is divided in half, right down the middle. And the two sides, the Greek Cypriots and the Turkish Cypriots, have basically been at war with each other for the last 100 years. And it's been a shooting war off and on, but it's a very tense one when it isn't shooting. One side is pretty much Christian, the other side is pretty much Muslim. And, of course, in everything that goes wrong, each side blames the other side. Well, it's their fault. If they hadn't done that, we wouldn't have had to do this. Oh, yeah. United Nations sent in multiple peacekeeping teams over a period of time to try to keep the peace by standing in between them. No, that didn't work. That didn't work at all. A man named Benjamin Broom went in there with a research team, and he knew something. He intuitively knew that if we get talking to each other about our hopes and our dreams, we will see each other as human beings. We will begin to create that connection. That's exactly what he did. Rather than have them tell stories about who did what to whom, with for what reasons, and what the results were, he simply said, what are your dreams for your children and your grandchildren? They hadn't expected that. They were hostile. I mean, they're sitting on opposite sides of the room. They're ready to kill each other. And they had to be checked for weapons when they came in the door. Seriously, what are your dreams for your children and your grandchildren? One by one, they began to stand up and talk about their dreams of their children, to live in a land where there's peace, where they can play outside without fear of being shot, where they don't have to worry about whether or not mom or dad is going to make it back from the market alive. They dreamed of a place where they could go to school and learn without barricades and barbed wire. And as they began to describe these things, the people talking began to realize that my enemy here has the exact same dreams for his grandchildren that I have for mine. If you've taken psychology, you've heard the term cognitive dissonance. And that's what it did. Their expectations were suddenly shattered by a different reality. And they had to reevaluate how they looked at each other. And so they did. And they began to talk. And it wasn't long before they were talking on their own. They were meeting on their own. And they were becoming friends. Their stories are what united them. You see, when you get around to dealing with blame, there's always enough blame to go around. Always. It's never isolated. And they began to see that each one of them held part of the blame, but also each one of them held part of the solution. That's the power of story. Now, Scripture is an odd sort of literature to us. It was written by and for people living between 2,000 and 3,500 years ago, some 6,800 miles away. Yeah, I went to Google Earth and I plotted a chart from here to Jerusalem. 6,800 miles. Not only that, it was the Bronze Age. The culture is totally different. There was no electricity, no refrigeration, no modern medicine, no dentists, no doctors, no opticians for glasses. There was no refrigeration, so if you got meat, you had to eat it immediately before it went bad. Marriages were arranged. You didn't have a choice who you married. Your parents arranged your marriage. Totally serious. Your parents would meet with the parents of the other party, and they would strike a deal. And your parents would come home and say, "You are getting married next year to so-and-so." "Who? I never met her." "Too bad. We picked her up. You're going to like her." I don't think we would deal real well with that, but that's the way it was. Average life expectancy was around 35 to 40 years old. In other words, life itself was a constant struggle for survival. It was not easy. Now that's a very thin backdrop for the discussion of these stories. Now pick one. Place yourself into it. I don't care which story. Pick one. But you can't do it at an intellectual level. Not possible. Not to get anything out of it. Why? Your culture and theirs are totally different. Except at the most basic human levels. Survival. To be needed. To be part of community. Those are universal. But cultures break down at that level. You can't do it unless you deal with it at an emotional level. So what controls how you interpret Scripture? What inside you automatically interprets something one way or another? Nose tickles. If you are reading something that you're very familiar with, you are much more likely to misinterpret it than not. Why? Because you're going to read it the way it was told you it meant. Or you're going to read it in the same way you read it before. One of my favorite translations is the New Testament called the Jesus Book. It's in Hawaiian Pidgin. Now, I've been to Hawaii many times. I know some Pidgin. I understand it better than I can speak it. But it took 40 translators 12 years to translate it into Pidgin. And I love it because it forces me to slow down and to read what is there. Otherwise, I know the New Testament well enough. I can just almost recite it to you as I go through it. This forces me to slow down. And that's what we need to do. We need to slow down. What is it that allows us to skim through it and think we know what it is we mean? That's bias. Now consider something else. You are inventing a new religion, and you want a lot of people to come to it. Well, Christianity's not that religion. Sorry. What? What would your heroes look like? Virtuous, strong, honest, trustworthy, fearless. Captain America. That's how we'd make it. And so as we wrote things out, we would be sure never to put anything in there that might be considered to be a flaw. Well, the Bible's got a lot of things people consider to be flaws. That's okay. I don't worry about that. But nobody, if they were designing a religion to take over the world, they would never design it the way Christianity is designed. Your main God is killed. He's beaten to within an inch of his life. He's then crucified and killed. What? And he rose again on the third day and then disappeared? He didn't kill the people who killed him? What? See, it doesn't make sense at that level. It makes sense if you think it makes sense because you've been told it all your life. But on a real level, it doesn't make sense. So one of the things that attracts me to Christianity is its bloodiness. It exists in the dirt, not the clean water. Now let's take a look at reality here. Let's take a look at a list of real Bible heroes. Okay? Adam. I love it. In Hebrew, it means dirt man. Adam. First man was a blame shifter, couldn't resist peer pressure. People were giving him a hard time in Genesis 3:12, and so he blames somebody else. He blames Eve. Well, it's her fault. Totally ignoring the fact that he was with her the whole time. If you read Genesis carefully, you'll see that's exactly what it says. No. It's her fault. Yep. So then let's take a look at Evie. She's the first woman. Couldn't control her appetite. So does she have a first eating disorder? I don't know. But let's consider something else here. He's not considered to be the hero, but he's a key figure. We have cast him as evil, but that's not the connotation. It was just a talking snake. We have recast him backwards as Satan. That's not how the Jews understand their own literature. We are reinterpreting their literature for them, and they don't like it. To them, it was just talking serpent, big deal. We'll come back to this. Eve. Well, Cain, firstborn, kills his brother. Did God kill him? No. No, he went on to build cities and have a huge family. Noah, the last righteous man on earth, who got drunk, slept naked, and had sex with his own daughters. Abraham, the forefather of the faith, let other men walk off with his wife twice. Sarah, the most gorgeous woman by popular opinion, let her husband sleep with another woman, then hated her for it. Not only hated her, but when she had a child with her husband, she ordered her husband to order them to leave and go off into the desert to die. Ishmael. Well, they survived. And today, modern Islam traces its way back to Ishmael. Lot, who lost his father early in life, had a serious problem with choosing the wrong company. There's Lot's wife. She couldn't even hold on for 2 seconds. Turned around. Job. I love Job. Supposedly a contemporary of Abraham and the epitome of faith, suffered from the nagging of a faithless wife. Oh, he suffered from more than that. You familiar with Job? I suggest you read it. Don't stop. It's long, but don't stop. Go through all 40-some chapters. It is well worth it. First of all, what do you notice? It says, one day, when the angels were coming before God, Satan was with them. What? Stop the train. Satan was with the angels in heaven, coming before God. And God's not even all that surprised. He's actually kind of friendly. He says, hey man, where you been? And Satan says, oh, wandering around the earth to and fro, looking around. And God says, consider my servant Job. That dude is amazing. He is totally righteous. He has been blessed beyond all other men, and he has not faltered against me at all. And Satan says, well, yeah, what do you expect? He put a hedge of protection around him. Nobody can get at him. Take that down, let me have him for a while. He'll curse you to your face. God says, done. So do we have a cosmic bet going on here? Certainly sounds like it, doesn't it? Now you have to understand, Job may be the oldest book in the entire Bible. We don't know. But it's certainly one of the earliest ones. And it's a story. It's not a history. Okay? So in any event, Satan comes down to earth and promptly attacks Job around the edges. His herds are run off and kidnapped. His slaves are destroyed. His children are killed. His crops are ruined. And suddenly he goes from being the wealthiest man in the world to nothing. Job does what everybody did during those days when they were in mourning, when they were grieving. He wore sackcloth, which is like burlap, which is really uncomfortable stuff, and poured wood ashes over his head and rubbed it into his skin. That's where the phrase sackcloth and ashes comes from. And his friends heard about it. And my gosh, what a tragedy. Let's go see Job. So they did. They came. And instead of saying, oh, Job, dude, man, wow, how could this have happened? You're such a good guy. No, they didn't say a word. They just shut up and sat down, which was the smartest thing to do. The Jews today call this sitting Shiva. When somebody dies in a Jewish family, the friends all come. They bring food, and they may talk with each other, but they do not talk with the family unless the family wants to talk. And it's comforting to know, simply to know that somebody is sitting next to you who cares. They did that. In the meantime, Job's wife, she's the only one surviving. She's lost everything too. She is thoroughly pissed. Her basic response is, Job, why don't you just curse God and die? And Job says, yet he kills me. I will still worship him. Whoa. But finally, Job gets worn down. And he basically turns into a little pity party on his own, saying, God, why? Why did all this happen to me? Why me? What did I do? He's really whining. And God interrupts him and says, stop. Who do you think you are? Where were you when I made all this? You dare question me? You dare tell me what to do? Who are you? Have you made anything like this? Have you made the oceans? Can you lift up the mountains? I'm paraphrasing, of course. And it goes on for several chapters like this. God is chewing on Job. But it ends well. Job never falters again. Job stays with God, and God restores him. Job is one of the most interesting, fascinating books, I think, in the Bible. So Job, he not only suffered from a nagging, faithless wife, he had his own doubts, as we all do. Then there's Isaac. He was nearly killed by his dad. He talked his wife into concealing their marriage. What? Why? Yeah, I'm still in Genesis, folks. Then there's Rebecca. She was the first mail-order bride. Oh, dear. She's kind of manipulative, shall we say. Jacob, who wrote the book on love at first sight, that's who wrestled with God, turned out to be a rather, was pretty much a pathological liar and deceiver. By pathological means constant. He couldn't help it. Rebecca, first mail-order wife. Jacob, Rachel wrote the book on the word love at first sight. She was a nomadic, meaning moving around constantly, kleptomaniac, meaning she stole everything in sight. Reuben, the pride and firstborn of Jacob, was a pervert who slept with his father's concubines. What's a concubine? It was like a mistress. In those days, a man could have as many wives as he could support and as many concubines as he could support. Moses, the humblest man of the day, had a very serious problem with his temper. He also said, God says, I'm sending you back to Egypt. Moses says, no. You don't understand. No, I can't talk Pharaoh out of anything. I stutter. I don't talk so good. My mouth doesn't work right. God said, too bad. You're going. Aaron watched Jehovah triumph over Pharaoh, formed an abominable idol during an apparent episode of attention deficit disorder. Perhaps colossal amnesia on their way through the Sinai. Miriam, the songwriter, sibling jealousy and greed for power. Now we're into Exodus finally. Samson, who put Arnold Schwarzenegger and every other bodybuilder to shame, was hopelessly enmeshed with a disloyal wife, ended up taking his own life. Eli ruled over Israel's hopelessly incapable father who lost his sons to immorality and to an untimely death. Saul, the first and powerful king of Israel, psychotic with manic outbursts, who committed suicide. Then there's David. David's the all-time champ. Psalms of David. David was, I quote, a man after God's own heart. Really? Well, says David danced in the street naked when the Ark of the Covenant was first brought to the temple. But more than that, we all know the story. Hot night in the temple, or in the palace. He was supposed to be with his army, which is what kings did every summer. They went out and fought other people. But he wasn't. And steps out onto the roof and looks down, and there's this absolutely gorgeous young woman taking a bath. And he is immediately drooling. Oh my gosh, look at that. And he tells one of his servants, go get her, bring her to me. And he's king. She didn't have a choice. There are also suggestions that she set this up. But as king, he had the right of kings. And so he had sex with her multiple times. To him, it was no big deal. Well, she got pregnant. And she's married to Uriah, one of his generals. And Uriah is off with his troops. And David's thinking, if Uriah finds out that I'm the father of this, he could kill me. Okay. Bring Uriah to me. They did. And he said, you've had a hard haul. Just give you a little vacation. Go home. Be with your wife for a few days. Uriah said, nope. Staying right here. I belong with my men. Well, it gets worse and worse and worse. And eventually, David conspires a plan to have Uriah killed in battle. In other words, he murdered Uriah. So David is an adulterer. He is a murderer. Whole bunch of other. He's immoral. You name it. He's probably got it going. So where's the edification in all this? Where's the uplift? Well, it isn't in the way they were. It's the way God is. It's in the way God said, I can still use you. I can still use you. And I think this is what your generation wants to know. God can use you no matter where you are, no matter who you are, no matter what you are. God has use for you. You are a child of the living God. God don't make junk. So you are not junk. You are a human being made in the image of God. Celebrate that. So God is totally honest in his depiction of humanity. He's authentic. He's pretty blunt. Temptation to misrepresent ourselves and the pressure to put on a mask causes further damage. Oh, yeah. We all have masks. We all have masks we want to put on that we can put on in an instant to keep people away. It's a mask that says, I'm something other than what I really am. It's kind of like in the movie The Wizard of Oz or The Great and Mighty Oz, where they finally go into the temple, whatever it is, and peek behind the curtain. There's this little man pushing all the levers for this gigantic wizard to move and to be real. It's not real. It's the little man behind, the frightened little man behind the levers. That's us. That's us. Sharing our stories can bridge those gaps. That's why I've said it before. Say it again. I'm going to beat it into you. 1998, I think it was. I'd come back to Christ in 1997. 1998, I'd been working here for 16 years. And I was at one of our meetings over in Seattle or Federal Way or somewhere. One of my colleagues came up to me and said to me, Daryl, what's going on? I don't know. What are you talking about? You're not the same mean son of a bitch you used to be. Oh, okay. I didn't realize I was a mean son of a bitch. Yeah, you were. You're really good at what you do, but you scared everybody. But now they're talking. You're different. Something's changed. What happened? Took me a minute to figure it out. But in Romans, Paul says, do not conform any longer to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. That's what it was. So finally I realized what was going on, and I said to her, Mary, can I buy you a cup of coffee? I'll tell you what's going on. She said, sure. And I simply said, this is the way it works for me. I can't say how it'll work for you or anybody else because I don't know. This is what it's done for me. She's an atheist. Was. So the gospel calls to us to come and live in the light, to leave the masks behind, to be authentic, to be transparent, to not lie about things. Now, somebody just said, I don't lie. Oh, bullshit. We all lie. Everybody lies. From the smallest little lie, like, hey, how you doing today? Oh, I'm fine, when you feel like absolute crap. Your world's falling apart. That's a lie. Because socially we know they don't really want to hear it, most of them. They don't. But if you've got a true friend, that friend is going to sit down and say, talk to me. I'm listening. I'm here for you. That's what a true friend does. And that true friend isn't going to spread it around to everybody else. You've got to be careful of those people too. There are those who are going to want to deal with whatever you give them and say, my gosh, pulse has gone off his rocker. Huh? So the gospel invites us to come and live in the light. Now, dysfunction cannot be equated to standing before God. No. But here's the deal. We're all dysfunctional in some ways. Every family is dysfunctional in some way. There are no perfect families. There are no perfect marriages. No perfect relationships. No perfect people. Been married for 52 years. And 51, excuse me. It'll be 52. And I'd love to say that everything's been wonderful. It hasn't. Some parts of our marriage were just miserable. But we stuck it out because we believed in each other. So it's not so much how we handle the issues, it's about who we are. Not just who we are, it's who we are becoming. Because it's a constant state of change. I don't think it ever ends. I don't think it ever ends. Case in point, my dad, he and I had a pretty rocky relationship when I was growing up. We didn't really start becoming close until, probably I was 45 years old. And he was pretty stubborn. He was hard-headed. He had this is what the Bible says, and this is what I'm going to do about it. There's no room for argument. Okay. He was very rigid in that way. But over the years, as he got older, he changed. He began to see that he'd been wrong in many, many ways. Several years ago, we were in Canada. We had my brother and I had chartered a float plane and a guide. We flew into a lake quite a ways north of Lake Superior. No roads in there. And we went fishing at a camp there. And one evening, I was walking along the shore with my dad. And I asked him, I said, Dad, now he's well in his 80s. Now he's like 86. I said, Dad, what was the smartest thing you ever did? Didn't miss a beat. He says, I married your mother. Smartest thing I ever did. I'm like, wow. I said, what do you regret the most? He says, we had too many rules when you were a kid. We didn't have enough fun when you were growing up. We let our religion get in the way of living, and that was wrong. I was blown away. Over the next several years, he got weaker and weaker. He had more surgeries, and finally he died just before his 97th birthday in 2011. But he was still changing until the dementia got his brain and he was no longer able to change. But he became the sweetest old man you ever met. Absolutely the sweetest. He was still experiencing that change. So the change never ends. Learning to read from a different perspective isn't easy, but it is possible. I've done it. But it reveals things you never saw before. Before we get into the assignment, I'm going to have you read John 8, 1 through 11, and I'm going to have that specifically because it's my favorite story in all of Scripture. But it's not scriptural. It says that Jesus was in the temple courts teaching when the Pharisees literally dragged a woman in front of her and threw her down into the dirt and said, "This woman was caught in adultery," in the very act. The law of Moses says we should stone her to death. What do you say? Now that was a trap. Because if he said stone her, he would be recanting his own teachings on mercy. And if he said let her go, he'd be saying let's break the law of Moses. The story goes that he didn't answer them. He instead got down on his knees and began to write in the dirt. I'd love to know what he wrote. Wouldn't you? We don't know. If you ever saw the movie The Passion of the Christ, this is where the face of Jesus and the face of the woman come together and they almost touch noses as they stare into each other's eyes. Finally, Jesus stands up and says, "Yes, go ahead and stone her. But the one who throws the first stone must be without sin." He had just trapped the trappers. Because now anybody throwing the first stone would be declaring themselves to be sinless, which is blasphemy. Because it was comparing themselves to God, and it was a death penalty by stoning offense. So one by one, the older ones first dropped their stones and walked off until only the younger ones were left, and they finally looked around and said, everybody's gone, we better get out of here too. And he finally says to her, "Woman, where are your accusers?" She looks around, she says, "There are none." He says, "You are correct. Neither do I accuse you. Go and leave your life of sin." I love that word picture. I mean, it's beautiful. It's not in the original manuscripts. It was added later. We don't know by whom. Most Bible translations will actually say this is not in the original manuscripts. Got a problem also with Gospel of Mark, the ending of it. The oldest first ending had the women leaving the tomb. It says they told no one, for they were terrified. The next one says they went and told Peter and Paul and the rest. And it ends there. That was added even later. And then the third ending was added even later than that. Says that Jesus said, "Go into the entire world, making disciples of the nations, baptizing them in the name of Jesus." In other words, my name. He says, "And this will be signs to you of the working of the Holy Spirit. You shall drink poisonous drinks, and you will not be harmed. You will handle poisonous snakes, and you will not be harmed." Okay, that's a little weird. It's the only description anywhere in Scripture even coming close to that. Like I said, it was added later. But some people pay attention to it. What you see is there are churches called holiness churches primarily in the Appalachian Mountains where they actually have live rattlesnakes and copperheads in their worship services, and they get going with the music, they get into a trance, they reach into these boxes, they pull out all these snakes, and they're carrying them around, rattlesnakes. I mean, they got enough poison to kill them. National Geographic did a series on this called Snake Salvation. If you want to look it up on YouTube, it's there. But the primary pastor of one of these churches was named Jamie Kuntz. And Pastor Jamie is absolutely convinced that this is not a suggestion, this is a requirement of all Christians to test your faith by handling serpents. And it says, because if you get bit, it's not going to hurt you. He got bit and died. That was the end of snake salvation. So, see, there are a number of things you have to know. You got to know the culture. You got to know the history, historical background. You really need to know whether or not something is actually scriptural. And from that, then, you need to interpret, shoving aside your own biases as best you can and reading only what is there and not what you want to be there. So here's your assignment for Friday, October 23rd. Read John 8:11. That's the story we just talked about. And John 12:1 through 11, as you normally would. Just read through them. I want you to write down an analysis of each story. Doesn't have to be long, few paragraphs each. Now place yourself into each story, imagining yourself as Jesus. Yep, you're Jesus. How does that change your perspective? Write down your experience. What changed? What changed during that experiment? So as we close out now, post your writing on the discussion board for this paper. Again, my goal is not to harm your faith. My goal is to strengthen it by helping you examine it. So yes, I'm going to say some things that you're going to find outrageous, maybe insulting. That's okay. And you can come right back at me with it. I love a good discussion. But you got to think, because you are the leaders of the new church. You are. The question is, when will you take your role and how will you do it? So if this makes any sense at all, great. Yeah, you know where I hang out. Always welcome in my office when I'm there. So got a question, email me, text me, come on and see me. I don't care. All of the above are good. All right. See you on Wednesday. Bye.